All right, the first job I want you to practice on is the smiley face. And so I found that it's working as far as capturing images, so long as it's Firefox, or not Firefox, but Chrome. So go ahead and right mouse, copy image, and then paste it in. Now this one does have an issue with the drop shadow, which is going to affect your ability to make a perfect circle centered to it. So we'll need these guides, so you can pull them down just like any program. And we'll go ahead and just do, for speed, we'll center them. Control F5, holding the smiley face. Control F5, and then we're going to modify this centering as soon as we get this approximately where we want it to be. So I'm going to go with the roughly, let's see, right about there. And then I'm going to nudge it up until it looks like it's the right size. It's perfect. Okay. And now I'll recenter the, first lock this. So hit the L key for lock. And hopefully I've done that. I might have to go back to your shortcuts and add the lock. Otherwise it's a range lock. And so now I can go ahead and take the guide and center it to that way. Oops, sorry. The object, then center the guide to the object. Centered. Same again, selecting the object first and then the guide and center. So now we have it perfectly centered. And then if you use the O key should create an oval, or the C key, I'm sorry, will make a circle, and the R key will make a rectangle, and S key is star, etc. It keeps on going. If you need to know what the shortcuts are, just click on over or hold over the object or that you're trying to create. So we're going to do the oval, and you don't have to use an oval. You can use a circle. It's not a big deal. And then just draft right over the top of it, and you can see it's trying to snap to the guide. So I'm going to take this. I'm not concerned about it being dynamic, or I'm not putting any strokes on this thing. If I was going to put a stroke on it, then I would use the numerics, or I'd double click on the object until I get the control points, these things. It's just you only get access to the right and left by default, which is doesn't work in this situation. So I'm just going to use the transform it by skewing it and just taking those corner marks until I'm happy with it. Okay, and then let's make it a color that we can actually see. And now we're going to draw the smiley face. And oh yeah, make sure you save as you go. All right, so the smiley face is just going to be a circle concentric. So I'll go ahead and hit the C key, and then starting at the center point here, just mousing over until it looks like it's centered. Then I go right about there, looking at the ends where they're meeting, and that's roughly correct. This doesn't have to be super accurate. You could get more and more accurate if you want. All right, now we are going to put a stroke on it so we get the stroke at the right size, and we'll change it to something we can see. I'm going to use this aqua because it's going to be easier to see over the black. It can be any color. All right, and then zooming in, and so I can change the radius of the circle. Under here, let's make it 5 even. Okay, and let me just make sure we're still centered. I'm going to use the guide here. Actually, I'll just go ahead and use the primary circle and do a full center. Yeah, it was a little off. Perfect. Now let me zoom in on it again. And when I hold the Z key, it just toggles on and off the zoom. And I'm using the control key. You can see that control plus the wheel is what I'm using. And then likewise, you can use panning with your hand, or you can hold the shift key and go left and right, or just use the roller the mouse wheel to go up and down. And yeah, and that's pretty much the way I navigate. So let me go and change this. Okay, let me go to wireframe slash fill mode, which is Control F. And then we've got an order issue here, so I'm going to bring that to the front, which is Shift page up. And then I'm going to go back to fill mode so you can see what I've done. All right, now the tricky part is to do a to cut them exactly at the same place. I recommend just doing a guide and centering, rotating it like so, and then I'll duplicate that, and then I'll just flip it and go back to center, roughly the same. I was thinking about mirroring this thing, but when in a test earlier, when I tried to mirror it, it just got weird. It didn't go exactly where I wanted it to, so I've given up on the mirroring for right now. Although I think with a little more effort and energy, I could get it to do right. So I'm going to go ahead and take the scissors tool, and we're just going to cut, because this is still a path or still an object that's not a solid. Go ahead and just cut along that guideline. All right, and then we can discard the upper half of it. And what we have is an open path with the stroke. So you go over to the fill and stroke editor on your stroke thing, and you change the terminations to round, as long as it's selected. Now I just made the default. I need to go back, deselect, and go change that back to square. All right, now I'm going to go back to a fill mode, and that looks pretty good. So on this, now we just need the center, repeat the eye. So if you take the guide, the vertical guide at the center, and hold the shift key, then do mirror, which is Control E, or it means Alt E, and then hit the OK button, or the green checkbox. I'm gonna go back to wireframe and see how close we are. Pretty close. And that can now be converted to a strokes to outline, which also Control Alt Shift Q, which I'm not sure I mapped that for you, but you can go ahead and make the mapping yourself. And then change the color. We can do Control Alt D for the eyedropper. Or I'm sorry, it was just Alt D, no, Control Alt D. And now if you want to do the fill, you just duplicate this. Sorry, he's using the Illustrator shortcut. So I just hold the Control key and drag over. And then while you've got the background and the foregrounds, go ahead and center Control 5. And now I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything. It's not going to do anything with the, actually we can, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and send it all back. So shift page down. All right. And interesting. Okay, no, let's do that. Let's unlock this for right now. And I think it's safe to move it out of the way. So just for reference. So the yellow, might choose a brighter yellow. And then I'm going to send this to the back because this is going to be our base color. Shift page down. And now we've got this darker yellow that was just the original color we chose, or I chose. And now we'll go to the fill and stroke editor, and instead of solid fill, we're going to go with gradient fill. And then instead of a linear fill, we want to go with a radial fill. And then instead of a RGB or CMYK, we're going to go with a spot fill. And because we want the center, you can see right here, to be opacity to be 0, and the outside edge to be 100, we need to change the shade to 100% opacity. It's a little tricky sometimes. Oh, I'm hitting the decimal point over and over again. Okay, there we go. And then change this one to 0. Okay, and now we change the fill color to a solid color, and we'll just use, for right now, you won't have any of these colors until I've given you the color palette, but I'll just choose that color for right now. And then because it's not a perfect blend, it's more concentrated on the outside edge, we need to create another point, and we'll call that 0 shade. All right, and then move it out to the edge. Okay, now right here at the top right of the fill and stroke editor, there's the editor for the gradient. And all you have to do is take the center line, put it on top of your center point for your axes, bring it out to the edge, and then adjust your density. Okay, and then what we'll do is go ahead and click on the fill and stroke editor under the blending mode and change that to multiply. And then let's change the opacity down to like 25% and just nudge it up until it looks somewhere right. Okay, and then I almost feel like we could have another control node, but let's see what happens if we just move that out a little bit. Yeah, it's not quite as smooth. So I could use another control node for the gradient. And you just click on the advanced and we'll add one in the middle. All you have to do is click there. And then I'm going to say OK. And that already smoothed it out. So it should, I'm not sure why. There we go. There it is. It had a little weird rendering issue there. But yeah, now you can just make that transition as smooth as you want. And we'll go with like something like that. And now you've got the smiley face. Of course, there's other ways to do this. You don't have to do it exactly this way. It's just one way, especially when you have this radius corner. If it was non-radius, you could use just an outline, and using this tool, the outline tool, or Alt W, and using the non-fill. So you want, there's the, let's see if it mouses over and says what it is. You mouse over, it says without backing or with backing. So without backing, and then you chose your width of the weight of it, for instance, like that. You hit OK, and then you need to separate the effect, which is Control Shift F, and let's see, Control Shift F. There we go. Like that, and then there seems to be a stroke on it, so I'm going to take the stroke off. And there was a stroke on the master object. If you look here, it's a 0 stroke, but it's still there. It should be transparent, and that's because by default, you can see when I have no object selected, that in the fill and stroke editor, it's showing the default stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and just make that transparent, which you could equally have just done. Come down onto this color bar here and just hit the transparent while holding the control key. Same here, you can change your default spot color to whatever it is that you want. Right now it says black. Do that. Now, if I was to take this over here and do the correct weight, if I was to put this on there and make the correct weight of the mouth and slit it, then that's the other path, but I'm not going to size it right now. I'm just going to show you using the cleaver tool, using the same guides. We could just cleave out the portion that we didn't want, delete it, and then come back here with the arc tool, which is optimize smooth arc, and just do that until it comes up with a nice radius. So that's what I was about to say, is that sometimes it does this weird tension thing. So in that case, if we were to take, this would not be ideal. I mean, obviously having that cutout is not a good thing. So, oops. Holding the shift key and centering this, and then using the cleaver tool, and then whack. I'm not sure that went on correctly, but I'm just quickly showing you. Oops, not sorry. E for, yeah. I missed the radius on that. If I go back, you can clearly see that I missed it. It didn't, for some reason, didn't. And I'm not even sure that I'm perfectly centered, but there we go. Now let's try it. I'm just going to leave the other one there. Yeah, you get the picture. Then you could weld it together. Now here's a problem with a weld because it's still if you look at the design editor and under objects, you can see that it's in effect, the weld is, and there's two different paths. There's a left and the right there. So until you separate the weld, it's you can you can't modify the arc in its entirety. You'd only be able to modify the one half of the arc or that half because it still looks at it as two entities, even though it's welded together. So to and I'll show you here quick. If you use this optimized by curve, you'll see that I can do it up to a point and it locks right at that seam point. So that's not going to work. Only we can do that is if you separate the effect. So if you do that, and now if you go to the arc optimize tool, you can see it bridges across. So this is good for like when you're working on like a front plate of a bike, and you've got your center line, and you're drawing your design. For instance, let's call this a. I'm not really sure why it's not snapping great. I'm going to look at my snap settings and then close this off. So if you mirrored this and then welded them together and then separated the effect and you wanted this to be a smooth curve, then that's where this comes in handy, where you separate them out and just work on your smooth curves. Now, what you got to have is discipline that you're not going to tweak on the outside edges. This is kind of like the finished piece. You don't want to start going in and making radiuses because they're not going to be the same. Now you could go and make radiuses, and then with using this guide here is take a rectangle and snap to that guide, ignore the corners, and then use it to punch it out. You can either use cutout or remove overlap, whichever you want, and then mirror it and then weld it again. So essentially you've got the same details on both sides that are exactly the same, provided that I use the rectangle because it's very good at making it straight up and down trim. So there you have it.